us this morning. I work for the Rural Action Center in Montague, and there's two other ones. One's in Wellington, and one's in Alberton. And I think Barb might be on the line, if not. And the Wellington Client Information Officer is Jose. Hi. And we are funded through ACOA and Innovation PEI. So without their help, we wouldn't be able to do things like this. So we also offer courses, and we are always there to try to help entrepreneurs get going. And if anybody ever has any questions or concerns, feel free to reach out to any one of us, and we can try to guide you and connect you to the right person. And yeah, I think that's all I have to say. And I'm excited to hear what Julianne is going to give us and enlighten us with. So take it away.
Awesome. Thank you. So good morning, everyone. Thanks for being here. I love what the Rural Action Center does, and I've been getting to know the team there a little bit more over the last couple months. So definitely, by all means, if you ever have the opportunity to connect with them and find out what they can do to support you, please do. So a little bit about me before I jump in. My name is Julianne Gauthier. I am a leadership coach. I work with Chandler Coaches we're based out of Charlottetown, Prince Edward Island. We work with leaders of all different types. So whether you're in the public, private, not-for-profit sectors, we really love entrepreneurs as well, because that's what we are too. And we recognize that, you don't have to have a specific title to be a leader. We probably are all leaders in many ways, not just in our organizations, but at home and in our communities too. So I really love the work that I do there. And I also own and operate a tourism business, which is Joey's Deep Sea Fishing in Rustico. It's been an interesting journey doing that. So my dad is Joey, and he started the business back in 1978. And this is the second season that I've been running it alongside with my brother. So we became 50-50 partners back in 2019, and we're able to let dad retire, at least from the deep sea portion of the fishing career. And he and I are operating it together. So a lot of what I'm going to talk about today when it comes to conscious leadership, I'm going to be using examples of running my own business and how different things can trigger me or come up, and why conscious leadership has been such a game changer for me in terms of being able to just keep going. I think especially in a year like we're in right now, a lot of us didn't really know what to expect and what to do, and that can be a really scary thing. So I'm going to talk a lot about that as well. So I am from PEI, born and raised. I did go out west for about 10 years. Is that here? Sorry. I'm in my brother's house, so there might be the weird odd noise, but hopefully it's okay. Yeah, so I was out west for about 10 years, most of my adult life, and I've been back now for almost 3, and I'm really happy to be back at PEI because it's really the best place to be. I've had leadership roles basically from the time I was 17 or 18 years old. I always knew that this was something that was near and dear to my heart. And I've worked in food and beverage, I've worked in nonprofits, I've worked in large corporations downtown Calgary, and kind of came full circle back home and am now running a couple of businesses on my own. So it's a lot of fun, but can be a lot of stress as well. And as I'm sure you all know, there's lots of things every day that can pop up and trigger us and really make us wonder, what are we doing? And are we doing a good job? What does that look like? So I'm just going to jump in a moment and talk a little bit about what conscious leadership is and why I think it's so important that we all learn these concepts and start to incorporate them into our lives. I did want to say too, anytime you have a question, put up your hand, unmute yourself and ask it, throw it in the chat, whatever you're most comfortable with. I like a good dialogue whenever I'm talking with a group. So if anything at all piques your interest, please feel free to share. Great. So conscious leadership is a new term for a lot of people. It's something that I've been working towards for about the last year or so, and my business partner, Lisa Chandler, has been doing it for longer than that. But in a nutshell, what conscious leadership helps you do is to respond to what is happening rather than react. And that's one of my favorite ways to explain it, because when we think about responding to something, we see it as being able to take the time to really figure out what our response is going to be and make sure that we can do it when our emotions aren't really high, or you've got your heart beating in your chest because something really got at you. That side of things is where I say we're reacting, right? So it's that knee-jerk reaction to something that has happened, whether somebody cuts you off in traffic and you just get, oh, I'm going to tailgate them now because they pissed me off, or, somebody didn't show up for a reservation that they had and you knew you could have filled it with someone else. It's really easy to get agitated or upset about that and react to it rather than take a moment to respond. It really helps you also, when you practice conscious leadership, to manage doubt and uncertainty. And this year, we know there's been a lot of that. I had a really hard time figuring out whether or not we should open our deep sea fishing business this year. I stewed on it for much longer than I probably should have. There was so much unknown. Can we do this? Should we do this? Will people even want to be on a boat with other people? What is this going to look like? We didn't know about the Atlantic bubble at that time either. We know, and I'm sure all of you as entrepreneurs know too, where your clientele comes from. And us as a tourism operator, the Atlantic bubble is great and it has been good, but the majority of our people come from Quebec and Ontario and Alberta and the States and all the places that weren't allowed to join us here on the island this summer. So that made it a really tough decision in knowing what to do. We wanted to make sure that everyone would be safe, our staff and our guests, and that we were following regulations that public health put out. And I know many of you probably also saw that, there were certain areas like campgrounds and restaurants and different types of businesses that had very clear guidelines on what to do. But for different ones like experiential, we were kind of left to our own devices to navigate that and figure out what that might look like. So I talked to a lot of people. I see Jackie Herbert's on the call here too. Like, her and I had a very long chat one night because she runs an experience-based business as well. So having the consciousness to know that you need to talk to other people and you don't need to be alone in making these decisions can be really important as well. Focusing on what matters is another cornerstone of conscious leadership. So we can get so caught up in all this other stuff that's going on that's really not going to help us drive results or make decisions or make an impact in the community or within your business. So I really needed to just take all that other stuff out of the way and figure out, okay, what really matters right now. And a couple of big things for us when it came to knowing if we were going to open this year was, well, we love our staff and we want to be able to provide them with somewhat of a paycheck this year. We didn't know what that was going to look like, but we didn't want to leave them to their own devices. We know that deep sea fishing is an awesome thing to do and it's a lot of fun for people, and in a time of uncertainty and fear and whatnot, why not be able to give them something to do and still do it safely, right? So just focusing on what matters instead of getting caught up in what could happen or what might happen and all of that can really help us then focus and make decisions. And really, when it comes down to it, conscious leadership allows us to be really intentional about what we're doing. We have a lot of influence as leaders in the community and in our businesses, right? In our homes. And that influence comes with responsibility. And we want to take that responsibility to heart and make sure that we're doing great things with it too. So it sounds sometimes like a lot, right? But when it really comes down to it, the practice of conscious leadership is so easy to use, and it's something that you can get ingrained in your day-to-day life. I refer to them all the time, not even just when it comes to running my businesses, but also in relationships that I have or different things that happen in my personal life. I can come back to these practices and help me really navigate them as well. So the first tool that we always teach is the one that I'm going to focus on the most today, and that is we ask the question, where are you? So when it comes down to conscious leadership, it's self-awareness that is a really key player there for us. And we have a single horizontal line that we use to navigate where we are. So try to picture it, if you will. If we are what we call above the line, so we'll have a line here and we can be above it, we're really living in our presence right then. So we are feeling a lot of trust. And when we're able to live above the line or be above the line, we are committed to learning. We get really curious about what's going on and we ask questions. We're open to different scenarios, different opinions, different beliefs. We can also be playful in this sense, right? Because we're not feeling really rigid and tight. We're open to things. We can be playful. It allows us to connect with others in more meaningful ways as well. And something else that's really huge is we feel a lot of abundance when we're in this sense. And so you could probably guess that when we're below the line, it's essentially the opposite of that. So we're very stuck on being right. And that can be one of the really big triggers for people. So if you go to the grocery store wearing your mask and you see someone else in there who's not wearing one, and you think they're wrong, they're supposed to be wearing a mask right now, they shouldn't be doing that. This is what they should be doing. We close ourselves off from being open and curious about why that might be that they're not wearing a mask. We don't know their situation, but we got triggered because we're doing what we think we should be doing and they're not doing what we think they should. So that can be a really big one there. We can also get really defensive. So if someone asks you a question, you can go on the defense right away and just kind of push back and not want to be open to talking about what it is or getting curious to look at different viewpoints, right? So if you flipped that around and you were the person not wearing the mask and someone called you on it, would you get really defensive? Or would you say, maybe you have a health concern or something that, maybe you have a great reason why you're not, but it's interesting just to see where does that defense come from you. Very possible also that you're very closed off. So you don't want to open yourself up to any discussions and you just kind of shut it down and I'm going to hang out down here. I don't want to talk about it. Being serious is another key part of being below the line, and threatened as well. So those all really come closely in together where when I was saying respond versus react, if you think about all of these, you're really reacting when you're feeling threatened or you get on the defense. And a big key there too is that you're always feeling like there's not enough. So anytime you catch yourself saying, I don't have enough time, I don't have enough money, there's not enough customers coming into my store today, that's you catching yourself below the line. Any thoughts or questions about that? Anything I can clarify? All good. Quiet group. That's all right. So I also want to make sure that it's not good or bad to be above or below the line. It simply is what it is. So I know when I explained being above the line versus being below the line, I'm sure all the things I was saying about it being above the line sounded fantastic, and that's where you want to be. And being below the line doesn't feel as nice. But the fact is, most of us spend about 80% of our time below the line. And if you think about your day-to-day interactions, that's not a far stretch, right? Because it can trigger us and bring it back down there. It doesn't mean we have to stay there, but it certainly is coming up all the time. And I think especially living in a pandemic and trying to operate a business within that, no wonder. And it can be exhausting, but it's a totally normal thing to do. And really the most important part isn't where you are, but acknowledging where you are and accepting it. Because I get a lot of people who will want to say they're above the line when in fact they're below. And that's just denial, right? So how are you going to do the work to get yourself above the line if you're just saying that you're there in the first place? So we need to be really open to just accepting ourselves for when we have a bad moment or a bad day. They're going to happen for the rest of our lives, and that's okay. So when I was planning for this today, I was thinking of some examples of when I've been below the line, especially over this last couple of months in this season. It's been a real struggle running a business and just trying to do all the things. Last year, I was running the deep sea fishing with my brother, but my coaching business was newer and I didn't have a whole lot of that on my plate. I also started a new board this year, so I just love doing a lot of things, and I didn't really know what the summer was going to bring. We didn't know if we were going to open, and at times I felt like I've got too much on my plate. There's not enough time to get everything done, and it can be really easy just to get into that that feeling of not enough or that scarcity, and in that state of threat all the time, right? So especially running a seasonal tourism business, we make our money in the summer. We don't necessarily get to go to the beach every day with our friends and family, or, you know, go out and do lots of things. And this summer, a lot of people who normally would have been working were not, and they were all out at the beach and having fun. And that can be really tough to go on social media and see everybody out seemingly having a good time, which we all know is just everyone's highlight reels. But that can be a trigger in itself too, right? So that was a big one for me. There was a day that I had, so I was actually telling Holly, I think before you all came on, we, in addition to running in a pandemic, we are operating out of a temporary location this summer. So last September, Hurricane Dorian, if any of you remember that lovely joy that we had last September, we lost our wharf in Rusticoville, where we typically do our deep sea fishing from. And with all the construction delays and everything that's happened, it's been like a perfect storm with COVID. We're still not quite completed of the rebuild. So we've been operating out of North Rustico this year instead. So each time a client is booking their fishing, I need to ask them all the COVID questions to make sure that they're clear. I have to tell them about a temporary location. I have to tell them about our payment options at this spot, like a lot of things that I never had to do before, where it was just like, yeah, good, got you booked in, great, we'll see you. And I'd love to think that people listen to everything that we say, but they don't. They hear, yes, I'm booked, and they're excited, and then that's it. So we had some people that showed up at our other location because they just plug it into the GPS and off they go. And I had a lady one day who told me, you know, she was pulling me below the line because she said, you didn't tell me that it wasn't at this location. And then I tried to explain to her the directions to find us. She went the wrong way. She ended up being almost 30 minutes late for the trip when I had a boat of people waiting to go. And so for me, it was very triggering because I wanted everyone to have a great experience. All these other people had showed up on time. They were excited and ready to go, and now we're holding it up. And I could have easily just been very panicky and upset about that and just let that completely ruin my day or ruin that trip. But if you can just take a few minutes, I kind of just walked around the side of the building, took a few deep breaths and said, you know, this is okay. People are on vacation. They're not super, you know, stressed out or rushed or anything. And my staff also were amazing. So we chit-chatted with the people who were already on the boat, ready to go. We, you know, started talking to them about mussel farms and oysters and teaching them different things so that they were still entertained and still felt like the trip had started, even though the boat didn't leave the wharf until a little bit later. But I could have easily let that ruin my day. Or I could have been really rude to that lady and been like, I know I told you, and, just be that committed to being right, like I talked about with being below the line. But instead, I could find a way just to open myself up to getting curious and wondering, who knows what's going on with her. She's on this trip with her daughters on her own. That's probably really stressful too. How can I make this better for her and be able to flip that over? So these are some of the things that conscious leadership can help us do instead of just dragging us down and having that rough day. It can happen with our staff too, right? So I had a weekend where one of my staff had booked the weekend off for a long time. The other staff member who does that same role said that he would work. And then like 3 days before the weekend decided he also wanted the weekend off. We only had like 6 weekends of the season. And that was a really like, oh God, like what are we gonna do? And that can be really easy to get caught up in the rigmarole too. But just stopping and taking a breath and then asking questions. Okay, like what has changed? Why do you need this now? What's different and whatnot, and having the conversation rather than just getting upset with them or going and, I could easily just call my brother and be like, can you believe this? This is ridiculous. But facing it head on and having the courage to do that because you're living in a state of trust instead of threat can really help you have those honest conversations that'll allow you to resolve things faster rather than continuing to just dwell on them. So like some of my favorite things to do, like you don't always have a lot of time when you get that trigger, right? You might be in the middle of a conversation or in the middle of an interaction with a client. But a few deep breaths can make the world of a difference. If you are alone or you have a bit of time, I love to like crank up one of my favorite songs as loud as I can. And it just like shifts your energy and allows you to see things a little bit differently. So like these shifts that we talk about don't need to be huge, like sit down and have a therapy session or anything like that. They're things that you can do completely on your own. It might be, getting up out of your chair if you're at a desk all day, moving your arms around, just kind of like shaking your body. And you notice that like, if you all did that right now, it even just kind of changes how you feel. So think about that next time that you're just like feeling really like tight and closed off and below the line. Just shake it off and see how that might work for you. Any thoughts on those examples, or just, starting to identify yourself where you might sometimes fall below the line? Kathy, that's awesome. I call it the Teflon woman. Just shake it off. I love that. I'm going to remember that next time I do it. I'll think of you, Kathy.
And I find too, kind of what you're speaking about above and below the line, I find it comes with experience. It's not necessarily, I guess as my role as ED, I work with board members and lots of members. So I find the more you're experienced in dealing with different personalities, it becomes easier to recognize which to be below or above and to acknowledge that. I guess I find, it's kind of a learned behavior for me, and I'm learning more every day.
That's great. Yeah, it's, you hit the nail on the head for sure. I love to think of conscious leadership as a practice, similar to like a yoga practice, right? You work forever to try to be a master of it, but I don't know if that ever really happens because we just keep being able to go deeper and find new levels of things. And conscious leadership is a lot like that too. So over time, we can build up our capacity to stay above the line for longer periods of time. But to start, it's really like up and down and up and down and up and down. And we could be blissfully unaware and just continue living our lives the way that we do, but then we're not figuring out how do we increase that capacity to be there. So simply just learning to spot yourself when you are below the line, even if that's where it stops, that in itself can start helping you evolve and helping you get ready to then take those next steps in learning how you might shift or whether or not you even want to.
Exactly. And if I think about when I started the position like 2.5 years ago, I'm in a very different space. So it's just basically, it's confirming what I thought. Like, you learn over time. And yeah, because when I think about when I started, I'm totally different than when now, right? I've learned a lot.
Mm-hmm. That's awesome. Yeah. And like, that's what we're here for. That's why we're here on the earth, right? We want to keep growing. I truly believe that if we're not growing, then, what's the point? So I'm glad to hear that. 2.5 years is a great amount of time to really sink your teeth into knowing, what are the technical parts of the role that you're doing, so that you can then also start figuring out who all the different players are that you're working with, build that confidence that you know what you're doing, and be able to work with people differently and navigate all these different relationships that, as the ED of a chamber, you would connect with so many different people on a daily basis. That's awesome. Jackie put a great question into the chat here. What if it's with yourself instead of others? So, yeah, that can happen a lot too. Do you have any specific examples, Jackie, of like, so you're catching yourself doing something that puts you below the line? Give her a minute to see. Nothing specific, but yeah. But yeah, it can be with yourself too. So it doesn't always have to be someone else that's triggering you, but something might come up. I know an example for myself is even things that I talk about to myself in my head. We all do that, right? I think. I got in the really bad habit of telling myself how tired I was. And because I was saying, oh, I have too much on my plate, I'm really tired, I felt tired all the time because that is what I was playing in my mind all the time too. So learning to catch myself now when I say that, and I try to flip it over and say, or find a way to get my energy in, do something like that. But it can help you really like just catch those triggering thoughts or comments that you're making for yourself, and flip the conversation instead. And no longer, I try really, really hard now never to say I'm tired, because I've chosen the life that I have and I have filled my schedule the way that I have. So one of the first commitments of conscious leadership actually is taking 100% responsibility. So I'm the one who put everything on my agenda that is there. I can't blame anyone else for doing that. Sometimes I look to blame myself, but that's just as bad. And that's, getting into a drama triangle, which is another section of conscious leadership we're not going to talk about today. But we can play that villain with ourselves very easily. And when we're in a role like that, that is 100% us being below the line. The entire drama triangle lives below the line, because that is where we are blaming people, we're shaming people. We might swoop in and try to be a little hero too. That Band-Aid fix also is below the line. It might feel good temporarily, but it's really not fixing anything. So it's really key to be able to catch ourselves when we're doing things like that. And I think as entrepreneurs, we hold ourselves to really high caliber and high standards. And it can be really, really easy to just trigger ourselves. Lindsay, great question. So I'm a huge believer in open communication and learning from other perspectives. I'm not strong with conflicts. So when having the conversation, but it's a rule you need to get across and you need to be right. How do you stay above the line? I like that. That's a great question. So when you're thinking about it as the rule, and yes, like that's a good connection to feeling like you need to be right. look at still how can you learn from it. So another way that we look at conscious leadership is content versus context. And the content is what we're talking about. So that would be the rule that you're communicating to somebody else. And then the context is how are you showing up in this conversation right now? Are you above the line or below the line? So it's not that you need to be right about this rule, because that's the content we're talking about. But you can get open and curious and ask questions if they're not agreeing with you or they're not understanding what you're saying, instead of you just shoving that rule down their throat over and over again, which clearly they're not hearing it. Find that curiosity. Start asking questions, start learning about where they're coming from. And that might help you then come full circle and connect the dots and help them also see why this rule needs to be enforced, right? So it can be a two-way street with that open curiosity and that commitment to really learning about each other. So take away the fact that that rule is the thing and put it over here in the content box and just show up how you need to show up. So let go of the need to be right and just commit to learning. Does that help? Perfect. Love these questions. Anything else on anyone's mind before I move on? Perfect. So another huge distinction we have is that you can't be on the line. We get that sometimes when we do our sessions, and we'll talk about being above or below the line. We'll have little stickies on, what does it mean to be one or the other, or where are you? And some people will put their sticky right on the line and they're like, no, I'm just right here in the middle. But we can't be. We have to make a decision. That's another, that's just coming back into denial. It's just as bad to say I'm on the line as it is to say I'm above the line when I'm below it. So I would usually challenge you, if you're telling me that you're on the line, I would challenge you to say, I'm guessing you're actually below, because you're committed to just being right or finding this other way of being instead of making a decision or a distinction. And that's okay, because sometimes we're not ready to really fully accept where we are. But to get more comfortable and confident in this and get to the point where we can recognize it, then, to know it and to see it, then we can accept it. And once we can accept it, we can actually do something with it. So that's really key. And it's, as I said too, a lifelong learning process. I by no means, I love teaching about it. I love sharing it with other people, because I truly do feel like it has made such a big shift in how I run my businesses and how I interact with people in all parts of my life, which is huge. But I'm going to continue learning all the time, and I'm going to keep going deeper and learning new things. And I love that about it too. So every time I have a conversation like this, like I'm having with you, I learn something new, or I get a new perspective and a new way to look at things. So that's a really cool experience as well. And something that, you don't just read a book and know the stuff, right? We have to be committed to consciously working on it. So I encourage you all to take a few minutes right now, or just a minute or so, and think about, when was the last time you would have felt triggered and went below the line? And who feels comfortable sharing with us? Lindsay? Perfect. Yes, I will narrate for you. Okay, so yesterday you dropped in to do some shopping at one of our members' locations and you were able to meet them after playing phone tag. That's awesome. You didn't get the best response and they were not interested in speaking. Interesting. Okay. And then you asked to meet at a later time. So you were coming in feeling excited. I'm supporting a member. This is awesome. And oh goodness, yay, they're here. I get to meet them. And then bam, they're not matching your energy level, right? Yeah, that's an easy one, right? Like that comes up, not an easy one. None of this is easy. But I just, okay, great. You are here and you're saying, I'm really excited. I'm in my new role. I want to meet all my members and make sure that they are getting benefit from the association. And they just see you as someone that's on their financial statement that they send a check to once a year, right? So that can really definitely be a trigger. I could understand that for sure. And that probably made you feel a little bit threatened or defensive, right? Like, oh, I want to really explain to them, but what about all these great benefits and all this stuff? And that probably was, your go-to reaction. But I think, it's hard not to take things personally when you're so invested in it. And when you love what you do, you're running your own business or you've got a role in an organization that you really, really love. It's hard to understand how other people don't love it the way that you do. I totally understand that. I worked in insurance for a long time too. People did not love insurance people, but I truly loved what I did. The key here, I think, is just finding, okay, what's taking a deep breath, not feeling like you have to rush into that like defensiveness or like pushing it on them of, that being right. Like we just talked about too, of saying like, no, like CCTP is the best thing for you. And these are all the things we're going to do and just like jam it down their throat. But, now taking the time because, clearly that interaction is over now, but how can you now take some time to reflect back on that from an above the line moment and get really committed to learning or understanding where they might be coming from? Is there, a way that you can talk to them about that to, just get committed to that and say, so if you are paying for this membership, but you're not utilizing it, I'm just curious to understand why. Not that you would want to lose them. And that might be a scary thing too, right? Because then you can just jump right back below the line because it really does happen that quickly of them, well, what if I lose a member because of it? And that can be the same for other organizations too, right? What if I lose a client because of this conversation I have? Or what if, and we can live in that unknown in that crazy world. But for you to truly be above the line and get really curious and really understand about it, there's always going to be a risk that comes along with it. But if you think about what the mandate of your organization is, do you really just want a member for the sake of numbers, or do you want an engaged community? And so if that does mean that you're going to lose a member because of it, then maybe they weren't meant to be part of the group as it was. But that takes a lot of work because you're going to continue to get triggered in that scarcity mindset if you're putting that pressure on yourself to hit different numbers or whatnot. So sometimes we have to look at our goals in another way and say, is it about the goals or is it about the engagement? What does that look like? But I would definitely encourage you to think more on this one. And if you want to have a chat at a later time about it, I certainly can help you work through that. Because I'm sure even though it's the first time it's come up for you, it may happen again, right? So how do you take lessons from interactions like this and be prepared to have that conversation in a different way in the future? Or even if it were to still end up the exact same way next time, how do we do it in a way that you walk away feeling better about it? I think that's key too. Awesome example, thank you. Anyone else? Has that got you thinking about something that might have triggered you to go below the line recently? One of my favorite things to help people work through them. I have another example I'll share too, because if anyone's writing a note, I'll catch yours next. But I had a group a couple weeks ago that booked last minute for a morning trip on a day that we didn't have anything on the books. So it was like, I think it was like 7 or 8 o'clock at night, and they called and I was like, okay, I didn't have my staff coming in the next day. So I had to, you know, hang up with them, call my captain, call my mate, see if they could come in, get back to the client, make sure everything was good. So everything's perfect. And then, so then the next day I got up in the morning and I was just about ready to leave. And I got a text from the client saying, oh, it doesn't really look very nice out. I don't know if we're going to come. That threw me so far below the line at 7:30 in the morning that I could feel it. I could feel my cheeks were flushed. I could feel my heart racing. I was so angry because I went out of my way, and this is me rationalizing my below the lineness, right? Like I went out of my way to get the staff to come in, and now they're going to cancel on me, and I'm gonna have to pay my staff, and I'm not going to get any money, and blah, 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 all these things. But I didn't even really have time to process this because I literally needed to be leaving my house at 7:30 to get to the wharf on time. So I'm going through all this. So it wasn't my best response, which, you know, we're not perfect, but so I texted him back and I was like, you know, I'm really sorry to hear that. I did call the staff in, especially for this trip this morning, as you requested. Please let me know as soon as possible if you're not going to be making it so that I can let the team know. But I just still jumped in my car and started going in case they did say yes. So the first thing I did when I got in my car was put on a song that I knew would make me happy. Because music is like one of my soul speakers. It's something that I love and can change me into any kind of mood. It can make me laugh, it can make me happy, it can make me cry, depending on what I put on. So that really helped. And luckily it worked out good. They did end up coming, but that was a little, you know, mini heart palpitation that I otherwise wouldn't have needed to go through. Or I could have been really rude and just been like, are you kidding me? You know, like that's what I wanted to say. But I stopped myself for a moment, recognized, you know, oh, they've got a bunch of kids on the, you know, coming out with them. And there's all these different things that could be. And when I can commit myself to that curiosity and that learning about what their situation might be, instead of being so threatened and thinking, you know, this is the end of the world if this trip doesn't happen, then I can just open myself up to be above the line. And it feels so, so much better to be able to get up there from time to time instead of just getting on that defense and being angry and serious and really feeling scarce about things. There's a lot of learning experience this summer. Any other thoughts? Oh, I have one here. Great. It's Kathy. I've learned that not everyone is engaged or likes us. It's very true. The 90-10 or the 80-20 rule. So focus on the ones who are engaged versus spending all of our energy on making those negative experiences better. do what you can from a loving, caring perspective and let it go. Yeah, I love that. It's so true. I was talking with a couple of other entrepreneurs yesterday. We were in a meeting, and we were talking about like reviews and testimonials from clients. And one of the entrepreneurs I was talking to said, well, I don't usually ask for them because I'm really scared that they're going to say something bad. But I know that this person does amazing work. And anyone I've ever talked to who has worked with her has absolutely raved about her and loved her. But she's too scared, so jumping below the line there, to ask for the testimonial because you're worried it's going to come up in that wrong way, right? But then she's also selling herself short because other people might be looking at reviews and trying to figure out who to work with, and she's not getting any of this because she's not willing to put herself out there, right? So I think we all need to know that there's going to be haters. I always joke and say, like, you've made it when you get the bad reviews because the haters will come out and those keyboard warriors. But one person who doesn't enjoy your experience is one person. That's their opinion and they're 100% entitled to it. I'm not saying completely just disregard it, but how can you look at that from an above the line approach? Maybe there is a valid part of their comment of something that you could change and make your business better. And that would actually be a benefit that they were brave enough and comfortable enough to share that with you. Sometimes, yes, we might prefer they privately message it to us instead of putting it on our Google review or Facebook, but we don't have that control and we never will. So we can't hold so tightly to needing to be that. But I definitely encourage any review, positive, negative, whatever, like really just sit with it and commit to being curious about where it came from so that you could see, could we do better? And maybe you couldn't. And that's okay too. That was in that same conversation I had yesterday. Another person was there who's an accommodation provider. And she recently had a review and the clients actually wrote a really long review. And one of the things was, we ran out of salt and we had to go buy our own salt. Just interesting things that you're like, really? Really? But what can she learn from that now? She's probably going to have a box of salt in the cupboard for going forward, right? So it'll help her in some way. But in the moment when you read that review, like all those physical feelings and sensations of being triggered to go below the line certainly are going to come up. Take a deep breath, come back to it later if you need to. We're not always ready to face it right away. And that's okay too. Like, don't force yourself into it. Like I keep saying, this is a lifelong practice that we're going to continue working towards. So be gentle with yourself. And if you're not ready to face something, accept that too. Because you could sit there and dwell over like, I should be doing this, or I should really go own up to that, or whatever. Then you're just wasting all your energy and spinning your wheels, telling yourself or shoulding all over yourself, as I like to say it, of what you think you should be doing when, maybe that's not the case right now. Jackie, what we got here? So you had a group book for a tour on Saturday because it was calling for rain and their other plans were canceled. They wanted it all. Lunch stop, extra stops, etc. Let the partners know you were coming, made reservations, and you were willing to, they were, a full restaurant too, and they did it because of you, which is awesome. And then you were sent an email late Friday and had to cancel everything because it wasn't going to rain anymore. I leveled up and I responded appropriately with a positive email about them coming next time, but I may have leveled down by hoping it rained all day. Oh, understandable. I mean, that's a tough one. And I get it, Jackie, like weather dependent experiences are a challenge, right? But good on you to not respond in your triggered reactive approach, which you may have wanted to. And like, it's okay to accept yourself for feeling this way too, right? Like if you want to sit back and say, you know what, I hope it does rain on you, and you're okay with that and you're accepting of it, and you want to be below the line, then be below the line. Like, I'm not here to tell everybody that the right thing to do is to be this, you know, positive Polly and be above the line all the time and whatnot, because I'm giving you something that's not even achievable. We need to just recognize where we are, and like, now we can laugh about that. I hope you're laughing, Jackie, because I love your laugh. But accepting that, you know, that's where I was. I still maintained my professionalism. I was able to be courteous, and, you know, at least also you got to reach out to the partners and arrangements that you made. But, you know, it still sucks. You did all that work and you got nothing for it. So yeah, you're going to be below the line. That's okay. Feel your pain. These are awesome, awesome examples. I really hope that this has been helpful in just giving you some insight into like what conscious leadership is. It's, you know, when you first see that term, I know when I first saw it too, I was like, what is this? You know, what, this will never pertain to me. You're laughing now. Good, Jackie. And working with entrepreneurs specifically, I think because I am one, gives me a lot of excitement, and I love showing them that, you know, you don't have to be a leader in this ginormous organization or, you know, a big corporate office downtown or anything to really see yourself as a leader and to practice conscious leadership. But at Chandler Coaches, what we really want is the whole island to be starting to work in this way. And we want to work with leaders who are willing to step up in their game and recognize the responsibility and the influence that they have, so that we can all feel like there is enough for everybody, and it's community over competition, and we can work together to continue to find ways to make things work. So keep thinking about all of this, please. I hope this will, you know, sometimes it takes a little bit of time for it to soak in as well and see where it's at. Kathy, are you okay if I ask this out loud too? So Kathy's asking if I can share a graphic, because, you know, some people like things visually. So I do have all of your email addresses as well. So what I can do is send out just a one-page graphic of the above and below the line, so that you can trigger that. And sometimes I encourage people too to just put it somewhere that they see it all the time as well, because then it can catch you and be like, I'm below the line right now. What can I do about that? What does that look like? So certainly I can do that. And I wanted to let you all know as well, like if this is something that piques your interest, something that you want to dive deeper into, we certainly have opportunities to do that as well. At Chandler Coaches, we have a Experience Conscious Leadership virtually 4-week mini course that's starting on September 14th. We offer this a couple times a year, and it is now an online course because COVID forced us to make it online, but it actually ended up being more impactful doing it this way than our old way. So we're sticking with it, which is great. So thank you, COVID, for helping us adapt and find a better way of doing things. But it's just $150, which is a fantastic deal. And you get 4 one-hour sessions similar to this with me and a group of other people, where we just dive a little bit deeper into these conscious leadership practices, give you some other tools to understand it at another level, and to help really implementing it into your world as well. So when I send out the graphic, I'll send you a link to that course as well. And if you have any questions at all, you can certainly reach out to me at any time. I'm always game for talking about conscious leadership and answering any questions, or just hearing what aha moments you might have had once you let this all sink in as well. Any other final thoughts or questions? Or Holly, did you have anything else you wanted to add?
No, just thank you. That was great. Like you said, we'll probably go throughout the day, and maybe our next trigger moment we'll go, So yeah, great. Thank you. That was great.
You're welcome. Yeah, thanks for having me. I really appreciate this, and so nice to see some familiar faces and some new ones too. So thank you all so much for being here today, and hopefully we'll see you again soon.
Awesome.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
everybody.
Take care.